You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Good evening, Hawks fans. Appreciate everybody for coming through and showing your boy a little bit of love, man. DeShaun Tate here, the official Atlanta Hawks Postcast. Another episode, that is, as we get ready to recap game number 68. The Atlanta Hawks and the Brooklyn Nets. Again, yes, I know you're probably already tired of hearing me say it. It seems like these things only happen in terms of resulting in a loss for the Atlanta Hawks whenever I am doing the postcast by myself. Not exactly sure as to what all that is about. We had to get to the bottom of that, but that won't be the only thing that we'll be getting to the bottom of. 122, 114. Unfortunate set of circumstances. As you know, every time there's a loss, that's kind of how I start things out. Loss for the Atlanta Hawks over the Brooklyn Nets. And of course, we'll kind of break some things down for you guys on tonight, recapping the entire game. Starting off with the first segment, primarily being about what I really feel like the Atlanta Hawks did entering this game. Maybe didn't necessarily show it for the first 24 minutes of the game, but I kind of feel like either that or we got some different things to kind of be concerned about when we're talking about the other 48 or 28 minute 24. Terrible at math today, minutes of the game. And that's what kind of leads us into that second segment after our first break. The oranges and apples again. We saw something very similar tonight that we saw the other night that took place when we saw the Atlanta Hawks take on the Los Angeles Clippers. So we'll get into some of that, of course, what those things were exactly. And then last but certainly not least, yes, we're definitely going to talk about our player of the game, which should be maybe one of the funnest segments you guys will see us do on an episode. Kind of a first timer for our player of the game. We'll talk a little bit about what you'll be talking about primarily from this particular game as well. And lastly, we will discuss some of a little bit about the rarity and just peculiar position I believe that the Atlanta Hawks is in a little bit with this particular team and at this point of the season as well. So we'll definitely go through all of those things and appreciate you guys again for certainly joining me. And don't forget, we'll talk a little bit about our turning point. What was the biggest turning point in this game? That segment, that part in our second segment as well. So before we jump right into Atlanta judging a book by its cover and all that I mean by that, I would be remiss if I didn't let you guys know that this particular episode of the Locked On Hawks Postcast, try saying that 3 times fast, is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Let's jump right on into it. I see some people are already in the comment section. People have been waiting on us to go live tonight and say, man, I want to get in on some of this action. I want to get in on some of this. I think when you're starting out with talking about judging a book by its cover, I think it's the obvious. I think that this was an Atlanta Hawks team tonight that read the names on the front of the uniform. I think it's just that simple. It felt like a game in which they were sleepwalking but weren't sleepwalking. I think the unfortunate part about this game a little bit is the fact that while I like to think that they judged the book by the cover and read the names on the front of the jerseys, the more embarrassing part probably about all of this is the fact that there's a possibility that they didn't and they were playing super hard and they just couldn't get any stops on the defensive end. And that's probably the part that probably hurts. People say the truth hurts. That's probably the one that hurts probably more than anything, because when you're in a situation where, talking about the Brooklyn Nets are without Cam Thomas. I get it. We're without Clint Capella and Karis LeVert. should be enough. Let's not mistake that, right? Because sometimes we tend to give people passes and say, oh, well, we don't have this one, we don't have that one. It should be enough still, even if you don't have a guy that formerly was in the starting lineup being Clint Capella, and a guy who probably should be in the starting lineup, maybe, that being Karis LeVert. Which I'm okay if he's not, but yet still worthy of being a starting player or playing a starting role for a team such as the position that the Atlanta Hawks are currently in right now, with guys being hurt and just bringing guys up from the G League and everything else. He should be that. But talking about guys that were being out, Noah Clowney, he was out. DeAnthony Melton, another guy that was out, been a starter in this league for many, many years. Cam Thomas, again, like I said, one of the better scorers that this league has, seen, and just prolific scorer, can light it up from all over the place. D'Angelo Russell, another guy who's been a starter in many places on championship caliber teams, was also out. So no excuses here when you're talking about a team that is essentially, right, starting Jalen Wilson, Cam Johnson, Nicholas Claxton, go Dogs, Tyrese Martin, who the Atlanta Hawks kind of did away with and never gave him any burn. We'll talk about what he did in tonight's game, difference between first, second half again. And Keon Johnson, a relatively new player to the NBA, coming out of Tennessee a few years ago. That was their starting five. They're beating, all defensive team players, first team, all league team players, leading defensive player of the year award winners or contenders, right? All stars, right? Most improved players, right? One of the best rookies, right, that we're seeing in coming out of this draft right now. Like all of these different things. I don't know how that happens. I think a couple of the things that I probably wanted to see more than anything with this particular game, I thought that the three keys was, one is not reading the name on the front of the uniforms. Go figure. Obviously, judging a book by the cover, something they couldn't afford to do, and ended up doing it anyway, right? And then I thought you had to really find Nicholas Claxton. That's actually a department I think they actually did okay with, was finding Nicholas Claxton, because he's one of those guys that likes to rim run. He's a hard worker. He runs like a deer, right? He's just a guy that just never stops. He's like a gazelle, right? He's just one of those guys that's always active around the rim, playing really good defense, bringing the good energy, a good rebounder. He's a guy that you have to find and that you have to box out. Kind of reminds me of like a JaVale McGee type almost, to a degree. He's going to create a lot of second chance points and opportunities for your team. That's something that we didn't see. And honestly, I thought if there was a possible way, which I didn't think that it would happen. I mean, barring the fact that, yes, the Atlanta Hawks have to show up, get off the plane, and put their shorts on one leg at a time, just like the other team. Okay, cool, got it, right? But besides that fact, I don't think that they were going to lose this game. This is probably why it's even just that much more disappointing, because there were runs that were made in this game, and the Atlanta Hawks appeared had separated themselves, and we'll talk about that again in the next segment. But clearly they didn't, and I'm not really confident that they did a whole lot to put themselves back in the position where they could have potentially put away a team that they never should have had to be concerned with putting away. So the first step to that is to make sure that a guy like a Nicholas Claxton is not being put in position to where he can be confident in any kind of way. And they did that, right? So I'm like, okay, that's a win, right? I think the other thing is the fact that you had to really focus on feeding Onyeka Okongwu really early, right? I always call it, if you've been listening to this postcast for a minute, hungry hippo. You, instead of working from the outside in, you start from the inside out by feeding the post. He's the one guy that you can somewhat rely on now. You've kind of gotten accustomed to or adjusted to being able to rely on him, even for some offense, not just a defensive guy, being in the starting role, one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent player on this roster since being inserted into that particular role in the starting lineup. So I think that you reward him for that. And it just makes more sense to do that because you don't want to overwork yourself or do some things that I thought was a little bit uncharacteristic of them on tonight. And you don't want to put yourself in that position, like working much harder for your baskets than the other team has to do, right? I think that you really had to conserve some of your energy, eat up in the post, win the battle on the boards, and win the battle in the paint in terms of paint scoring. Paint scoring, they did that, right? But here's the things that concern me before we, obviously we're up against a little bit and getting ready to go to a break. The Atlanta Hawks is the fifth best scoring team in this league. The Brooklyn Nets is 29th. Mind you, there's 30 teams in the NBA? Yeah. How about 122 hung on the Atlanta Hawks on tonight, right? So that already says enough within itself. Clearly having more points than the Atlanta Hawks. Shooting from the field. This is a team that within the Brooklyn Nets that is 28th in the league. Remember, only 30 teams in the NBA. 28th in the NBA in terms of field goal percentage. What they shoot tonight, 48%. One of the lesser than 3-point shooting teams in this league being the Brooklyn Nets. Not only did they outshoot the Atlanta Hawks by a significant margin, might I add, at 48%, but they also are a team that is 24th in that particular department. Free throw line, I can live with that because it's not a surprise that they're going to be able to outshoot the Atlanta Hawks from the free throw line. But how about from a rebounding standpoint? And this was the concerning part for me, because we know that of all the things that show up on the stat sheet, one of the things that I feel like is more so of a big deal in terms of what determines a lot of times games that are won and lost is from the rebounding standpoint. What happened on tonight? A team like the Brooklyn Nets not only out-rebound the Atlanta Hawks by 3, but they also out-rebound them in the offensive rebounding category that not only is the Atlanta Hawks ranked within the top 10 in that department, but also got out-rebounded by the Brooklyn Nets by 3. That is the reason that they were out-rebounded. Those 3 offensive rebounds is the 3 rebounds as to why the Atlanta Hawks were out-rebounded by 3, because it happened on the offensive end, which is even a bigger indictment in my opinion. From a turnover standpoint, that being another thing, maybe Atlanta didn't have as many turnovers tonight as Brooklyn had. However, because we got to make it a conversation, 14 turnovers by the Atlanta Hawks tonight is still too many against a depleted Brooklyn Nets team like we saw them roll out there on the floor as far as tonight goes. They even had more assists than the Atlanta Hawks on tonight. Don't forget, the Atlanta Hawks is second in the NBA in terms of assists. So I think that it's more to it than just a couple things. It could have been different. Okay, they had a good night, a much better night than we're accustomed to. Maybe the Atlanta Hawks had a bad night. The Atlanta Hawks didn't even really have like a terrible night like that in terms of the things that are going to show up on the stat sheet. The unfortunate part about that is what also shows up on the stat sheet is how well the Brooklyn Nets ended up playing in terms of not being able to miss shots, and the Hawks maybe not being and the Hawks not being able to get stops when they were probably the most needed. And I think that is probably the biggest determining factor. Of course, we'll get into some more of this. We'll get into some comments. I see you guys out there showing some love, and I'm so grateful, so appreciative of those things. But we'll talk a little bit about the oranges and apples, those differences that we saw, very comparable to the Clippers on the other night, right here on the other side of this break. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh and you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, excuse me. Every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you will score a huge deal the very next day. And it's so simple. So simple. Get a little bit closer. Check this out. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. Here's just a couple of different ways that you can take advantage of this deal, because I know some games is going to be coming up. I know sometimes you get lunch breaks and so forth. Sometimes you need that food delivered to you. You can't always go off campus, because I know how it is, much like any of the other stuff that I'm ever doing in terms of my other gigs or what have you. Sometimes you get that little 30-minute break. You don't have enough time to go down the escalator or go down the elevator or go down the stairs and go to your car, especially if you park way out in the back like me, because you don't want everybody dinging your doors up. So you park way away from everybody. You get in your car, you go grab you something to eat. By the time you come back, you don't even have any time to eat the food, let alone clock back in for work. All that stuff is just way too inconvenient. I'm telling you, when it's situations like that and it's lunch on the go, you need a quick and easy lunch, maybe even for the very next day. With Dash Pass, you get your favorite meals with $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees. Plus, now you even save more with this exclusive NBA offer. Maybe perhaps you're fueling a watch party. Could even potentially be a March Madness party that's going to be coming up this week. Want to be talking about ordering some food and so forth. Planning to catch that next game? No problem. Order your go-to snacks and meals at a discount and get ready for more high scoring action. So sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more points in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off of an order the very next day, up to $10 off. Just use the promo code NBA50. Remember, NBA50 from noon until midnight after 50-point game. Any 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants must have an active door pass, account. Terms will apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. Also, want to make sure I'm putting just a little bit of emphasis on this before we get ready to turn this whole thing around. When that offer is live, noon until midnight, the day after the game, exclusive to Dash Pass members. And of course, I have to be here to remind any and everybody, if you're out there, I'm not going to let you forget by any stretch of the imagination. If you know anything about me, DeShaun Tate, even judging based off of the the hoodie that I'm wearing on this evening, March Madness is here. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on all the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, upsets, the whole 9 yards, and even who's cutting down the nets. First week, San Antonio, Texas. We'll be seeing who'll be standing on that ladder with the scissors in hand. I mean, listen, I know that who I'm taking. I might have to educate you guys a little bit later. Hit me up on the tweet, back channel me, DM me, whatever you need to do. I'll give you some more information, but make sure that when I give you that valuable information on who to take when you're filling out your brackets, that you go right here to FanDuel and make sure that you get your rent paid, because I feel pretty good about my chances on who I'm taking to win the whole thing. Not only that, but it's also very easy, very fast. The FanDuel app is very simple to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly. Ain't going to be no waiting around. I got to have my tokens up front, baby. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on all the college hoops action all tournament long. Remember, FanDuel.com. Appreciate everybody for staying in here with your boy, man, DeShaun Tate. Another episode and second segment of the official Atlanta Hawks postcast. Let's go over here to the comments real quick because I know some people came through and was showing some love, maybe even some frustration, just a tad bit. Some people saying, "Oh, of course, we got our regulars up in here, man." My dude Robert coming through talking about how horrible that this is of a loss, and not only that, but the Hawks underestimated the Nets and played like they were playing a college team instead of a professional basketball team. Ain't that the truth? That's all I was saying. I'm not Mr. Know-it-all. I promise you I'm not. But it just had that feel like it was like, whatever. If we do, we do. If we don't, we don't. You know, that just kind of is what it is. I'm glad that Brian is certainly agreeing because he ain't taking, no L's lightly either. I hate this team sometimes. The Nets are sorry. Inexcusable loss. Stop being soft. My goodness. And that is something that I can't, disagree with or I can't agree with anymore, than the way that they put it. Just because of the simple fact that, it's there's some that are excusable and there's some that are inexcusable, but you excuse them anyways. This isn't one of those ones where you can really afford to do that, in my personal opinion. Like I don't know. I'm just one of those ones that just typically I don't know. I kind of feel that way when it comes to this team and the team that they played and where they should be at in the season and where they're at in the seeding and where they need to be so they can put themselves in a comfortable position to be able to do some good things. But without further ado, let's make sure that we do this before we do anything else and talk about the turning points in this basketball game.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
Talking about the turning point. Wow. Let's first address what I thought was going to be the turning point. This is where I'm always talking about the oranges and apples, because as you know, what we saw was just so different, not only between halves, but between quarters. I should have known something was up when I'm looking around in the first quarter and I'm seeing that the Brooklyn Nets had only gone to the free throw line one time. However, in the second quarter, they go to the free throw line 15 times. Weird. But the Atlanta Hawks had a pretty good second quarter, right? We see them go on a 21-6 run in the second quarter, late in the quarter. They close out the half that way, including, right, a 10-0 run during that entire stretch. They scored 35 points in that second quarter alone. Looking good for the Hawks, about to turn the corner. Why didn't I automatically know that something is going to go on in the third quarter? And it probably wasn't as bad as it felt when I go back and kind of look at it, but it felt bad. And I feel like not everything has it turned into just showing that it's getting bad because there was this scoring drought or a scoring run that someone else went on. Sometimes it's just the little things and the energy that came with that. So what happens in the fourth quarter, between the third and fourth quarter, I think where the game kind of turned at, because at that particular point, I thought it had turned into the hands of the Hawks, but I think it ultimately ended up benefiting and turned to the hands of the Brooklyn Nets instead, because you see on that particular run in the fourth quarter, Max Lewis, whoever in the hell that is, I know we always talk about the random role players. There was far too many of them tonight. Hence exactly why I get a little bit peed off at this Hawks team right now, just looking at things across the board, right? But Max Lewis hits a three. Trae Young gets subbed out. In between that time, we see Day'Ron Sharpe have a dunk. Keon Johnson hit a three. 2 free throws were shot and made. Of course, now here comes Trae Young checking back into the game. They're already down on a 7-0 run. Now at this point, lose the lead that they had built somewhat comfortably for themselves. The Hawks miss far too many shots, at least close to about a handful or so. And then next thing you know, here comes all these energy plays from the Nets. Now, were they big time? 3-pointers and anything that looked absolutely crazy. No, probably not a bunch of and ones and going to the free throw line and 3-point plays and 4-point plays, probably not. But they were dunks. They were getting out in transition. They were doing little things, hitting the open man, sharing the ball, amongst one another very well. Something we typically see the Atlanta Hawks do, but they were sharing the ball at the most critical moments and times and possessions in the game. And they ended up with big plays because they ended up being dunks. Now, not now all of a sudden the crowd is into it and so forth. I think ultimately that is what made the change when you start talking about what turned this game around for the Brooklyn Nets. And it just seems like after that, the Hawks didn't do a very good job at saying, okay, you know what? We're gonna make a run, we're gonna make a comeback, and we're gonna put them away once and for all. Even if we didn't, just made me feel like they were gonna climb back into this game and give themselves a realistic chance at winning it, even if they lost it by a possession. No, they didn't lose it by a possession. They lost it by multiple possessions. And when you're looking at a loss by 8 points and it just gets flipped just that fast, I think that's kind of where I have a hard time accepting the kind of performance by the Atlanta Hawks on tonight. Not only that, but when you start looking at, for example, the bench scoring total on tonight, it was similar if you're looking at it at the end of the game from that standpoint. However, between halves, you got Georges Niang into the first half at half, 10 points. What does he finish with in the game? 12 points. He's +2 in all the minutes that he played in the second half. Terrence Mann, 9 points at the half. He finishes with 13. He's +4 for the second half. Vit Krejci, 3 points at the half. He's got 8 points at the end of the game, +5 in the second half. Not nearly enough when you're talking about trying to make some stops. And if you're not going to make those stops, you got to be able to put guys in the ball and you got to be able to put guys in the game that's going to be able to shoot the ball efficiently, effectively. You don't have a whole lot of help down in the post or anything like that. So you got to be able to hit those wide open shots, slightly contested shots, right? Guys are closing out late, things of that nature. And you've got the shooters. Those other shooters not only on the bench, this is one of the best benches, if not the best bench scoring in the league. Guys got to be able to hit your shots against the Brooklyn Nets, I'll remind you, right? So finishing with 12 points at the end of a game where you had 10 at the half, finishing with 13 points at the end of a game when you had 9 at the half, finishing the game with 8 points when you had 3 at the half, that's not going to cut it. That's probably one of my biggest issues. And then I'll say this real quick before we go to our next break and then go ahead and close out with everybody. That isn't even my only issue. Let's talk about from the first half to the second half for some of their key contributors that just so happen to be starters now for this particular game. Tyrese Martin, I already told you how I felt about him no longer being on this roster. You don't let this guy who you cut, right? He couldn't be a part of the bench mob and so forth. You cut him or he goes his separate. He's not on this Hawks roster anymore. Let's just put it that way. At the half, he has 3 points. He finishes with 16. Keon Johnson has 5 points. He finishes with 22. Tyrese Martin shoot 1 for 4 from the field at the half. He finished 6 for 13. Keon Johnson 1 for 6 from the field at the half. He finishes 8 for 20. Tyrese Martin 0 for 2 from 3 at the half. He finishes 3 for 7. Keon Johnson 1 for 3 at the half. He finishes 4 for 9. Four rebounds for I don't even feel like I need to even go through the rest of this. Like that's more than enough. Handy dandy notebook, all the writing, scratch, scribble. That's more than enough right there. That's your ball game. That right there is your ball game, folks. I'm not even sure that I have more than that. These are the things that people aren't going to talk about as to when people say what's wrong with the Hawks, and people aren't going to know to go back and think about what really was transpiring. That I just read to you is what was actually transpiring and why Hawks fans, Hawks Nation have the egg on their face this guy included. We'll be right back for you guys talking a little bit about the player of the game and maybe even include a little bit of certainly going to talk about Onyeka Okongwu, and then I guess we'll close out with what everybody will be talking about right here on the other side of this break. Have you ever checked your bank account and wonder where in the heck did all my money go? Sure, I'm not the only one who's thought that multiple times. Between dining out, eating out, it's crazy. Eating out is almost, I used to think that eating out would be spending more money than it is to sit there and cook at home. It's almost about the same. No matter what, either way, you're spending your money on food, you're doing your online shopping, you even spend a little money. You figure you do all this work and pay all these bills. You want to put a little bit to the side for yourself so you can enjoy yourself. You want to spend some money on some entertainment. All of these different things are just so easy to lose track of, and that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. So keeping this in mind as well. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, but it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in all in one place. So you just stop managing your money and start building your wealth. Sometimes you just throw money from left to right. You forget how to keep up with so many different things. And now I'm keeping up with receipts and trying to remember and trying to, keep up. It's tax season and W-2s. And what did I spend on this? What's a tax write-off? This keeps up with all of that. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year.
This is what you'll be talking about.
Let's talk a little bit about what everybody will be talking about, because I do want to put a little bit of a positive spin on this thing before we start getting into the other stuff a little bit more. Dyson Daniels, who ended up getting a technical foul, which was a little bit uncharacteristic, if I'm just being really transparent, in the third quarter. And I was kind of curious to know, how is he going to respond? Responded well, and particularly on the defensive end, but even more so in some cases on the offensive end as well. Put himself a pretty good night on tonight, which I think kind of catapulted and boosted him a little bit more. I'm not sure if I love him being an angry player, but I do love him being a quiet player. Sometimes I think that it's even worse. It's one thing when a guy is just killing you on the offensive end or maybe even on the defensive end, and I kind of like this about him. When a guy's killing you on the offensive or defensive end and they just jaw jacking at you a little bit, and just talking a little bit too much for my liking. But they can tend to get under a lot of people's skin. What makes it even worse sometimes when a guy is killing you on the offensive and or the defensive end, i.e. Dyson Daniels, and then they're quiet. They don't say a whole lot to you. Well, that wasn't the case on tonight. He felt the way about a play in the third quarter and decided to be a little bit vocal about that, but more so didn't want to give the ball right away to the ref, causing a delay of game situation. Came back out and played pretty well for himself. Didn't play amazing, but certainly didn't do enough, but definitely not going to be the reason behind why the Hawks ended up losing tonight. 14.7 assists, 5 rebounds, shooting 6 for 11 from the field. But here's probably the most interesting part, and this is where I'm going to go and lead into who's going to be the player of the game. Did you know that Dyson Daniels has 192 steals? That is more than any other player in the NBA in the last 15 years. What a feat. Congratulations to Dyson Daniels. And they talking about considering all these other people, Jaren Jackson Jr., all these other people about being defensive player of the year. Will this team win a world championship this year? I don't know. Realistically speaking, probably not. Are they going to be a team that's going to go to the NBA finals this year? Realistically speaking, probably not. It wouldn't be the first time I would have the egg on my face, again, matching my expressions and how I feel about after tonight's game, if then be the event that they go and do those things. But what I do really feel confident and strongly about is Dyson Daniels' chances to be the defensive player of the year representing the NBA and the Atlanta Hawks on this year. And this is where we dip into our player of the game.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
Glad we can get into the player of the game, because this is one that I told people that you probably wouldn't have thought of. I told you there was going to not only be a player of the game that's representing the Atlanta Hawks that has never been represented before as our player of the game on this particular program, but even more so is the fact that hopefully there will never, ever be this player of the game again for the Atlanta Hawks. That may not have made sense. Why? Because I don't think anybody on this team deserved to be the player of the game on tonight. You had some guys that had some decent numbers, right? If there's one, I guess Onyeka Okongwu leading the way, probably with the best looking numbers, 21 points, 15 rebounds. We can get into some of that stuff later. 7 for 11 and 50% from the field. Trey had a pretty good night as well for Trey standards, but people are going to totally ignore that. 6 turnovers, in which they shouldn't. Zachary Reese-Shea looked pretty good on tonight as well. Give him some credit. 16 points. Still a rookie, still a learning curve, still a rookie wall that he's got to kind of bust through a little bit. I could tell you who wouldn't have been the player of the game on tonight, Mr. Georges Niang, 4 for 14 from the field, 2 for 9 from 3. Why wasn't he subbed out of the game again and taken out for Garrison Matthews? Don't ask me that question, because I really don't want to tell you that. I don't know. But I don't think that there was a player of the game tonight. I don't think there deserved to be a player of the game for the Atlanta Hawks tonight. And the last thing I'll say about this before we get up out of here is showing some love to Double O being the lone Hawk, because this is the issue that I think that this Atlanta Hawks team has. While we're talking about a backup point guard, and we're talking about this guy and that guy and so on and so forth, they didn't have anybody to bring off the bench on tonight that can even give a dog rat's butt in terms of scoring in the front court that can help Onyeka Okongwu. Nobody from that standpoint. I guess if you want to consider Zachary Reese-Shea a forward, then cool, I guess. He's a 2/3 in my opinion, but I don't necessarily see him as a front court player per se, right? If you do, cool. Congratulations. You're smarter than I am. That ain't probably saying a whole lot at all. That ain't speaking a whole lot of volume. But I will say enough to say that that is one of the things that stuck out to me the most. That this is where I have to give Onyeka, as I have been the last few weeks, and I promised Tanisha that I will continue to do that as long as he continues to do what he's supposed to do. He's doing his job. He's efficient at his job, talking about Onyeka Okongwu. He's playing good defense. He's defending the basketball. He's putting himself in position to be able to catch some lobs, but not just limited to those in terms of how he makes his money from Trey, because he's stepping out from outside from 3, not overshooting. It's hard to take a big man who is not really good and efficient at shooting the threes, never get a chance to do it in a 3-point era type society that we live in today. He started developing and establishing that part of his game a little bit, and then expect him to not fall in love with it to a degree. Right. And he hasn't done that. And I think you have to be able to have some of that balance. And he's been able to provide that. Appreciate everybody for joining me on tonight, man. We'll see you guys here in the next, 24 hours. I think we're talking on Tuesday night at the Charlotte Hornets. Please don't let me down and have another one of those nights where you're reading the names on the front of the jerseys. whatever you do. Remember to give us a follow on all social media platforms. Even me, you see it right down here somewhere, right here on the bottom. Tate's Take Hoops, TATESTAKEHOOPS. And make sure you give Tanisha a follow as well. Hope you guys are back with me, joining me again on the Postcast in the next 24 hours immediately after the Charlotte Hornets game. Peace up, A-Town down. I'll see you guys then.